It's really an honor to be here and to get to read with two of my favorite poets and also two of my favorite people. Not just saying that. It's also special because I feel like I've been trying to make it to California since this book came out a little over a year ago, and I'm grateful you let me hop on your reading. Because I work for a bookstore, I know that so much more work goes into making an event happen than anyone really knows. So thanks also to the Booksmith. It's special to be here. I'm going to read a few poems from Judas Goat, this first and only book, and I'm going to begin at the beginning. This is a very haunted book. It's pretty obsessed with violences of various kinds and how violence moves through intimate relationships. There's also an obsession with animals throughout, particularly domesticated animals. And I think the first poem does a decent job sort of thrusting a lot of these major themes at you. Can't decide if I want to perch on this or not. I think I'm just going to stand. Okay. The dog. He didn't want to tell me. He almost didn't. It was luck, much more than gut, that made me ask. A beer opened an hour earlier than usual. The desire for conversation. There was no sense in me that he was in some sort of aftermath. Did I lose sound? It felt like I did. Oh God. The dog. He didn't want to tell me. He almost didn't. It was luck, much more than gut, that made me ask. A beer opened an hour earlier than usual. The desire for conversation. There was no sense in me that he was in some sort of aftermath. He said when I asked, I had a bad day, or I had a weird day. I can't remember. I saw a dog, he said. I was on the train. A man with a dog on a leash. The man ran and made it, but the dog hesitated outside and the doors closed. No, not on his neck, on the leash, trapping it. The man was inside and the dog was outside on the platform. The button beside the door ringed and light blinked. The man was shouting now, hitting the button, all else silent. The befuddlement of dog pulled along, the pace slow until it wasn't. The tunnel the train must pass through, leaving the station, is a perfectly calibrated, unforgiving fit. The dog had a color and a size I don't know, so it comes to me as legion, large, small, fur long or short, white or gray, but the man always looks the same. As I held him against me in our kitchen, the moment sharpened my eyes. How easily I could imagine a version of our lives in which he kept all his suffering secret from me. I saw the beer on the counter. I saw myself drink it. When we went to bed, I stared at the back of his head, split between compassion and fury. My nails gently scratching up his arm, up and down, the blade without which the guillotine is nothing. Thank you. So I've been thinking a lot about my co-readers' books in the last few days, including on the plane ride over here, and thinking about how Theophanies is dedicated to the mother line, and thinking about Dear Memphis and this incredible series of poems where Rachel is addressing a southern home place. So I wanted to read a few poems that felt in some sort of conversation with these things. And I do actually have a poem in the book called Dear Birmingham, which is my hometown. And I thought I was going to read that, but I'm going to switch it up and I'm going to read this poem called Strawberries because it actually feels more like a hometown portrait as opposed to reaching across a distance from the unnamed Seattle. So this is Strawberries, and it's a hometown poem for Birmingham. A car's tires the thunk over the rubbery black tripwire at the oil change, triggering a fat bell, and a group of girls in silver leotards are reflected, like spatters of sap in its windows, liquidine, firm, gleaming. It's a game day. They are the girls chosen to split in tempo to the brass band. Heel of a front foot sliding over astroturf. Top of a back foot grinding over lit green. Cervix slapping the 50-yard line like a fried egg flipped down on a griddle to burn. Behind the bleachers, a boy takes off the shirt of another boy, paints a letter there in red paint. R, and then another boy, I-O-T. When the sun goes down over the ridge, all the painted boys will make patriots. For now, the sun rises, sanctioning the street. Jiffy Lube, pet store, the Sam Super sandwiches teens file into, practicing the joke of language. The morning is cool on the outside and hot in the restaurant. The war in the words, playful as a war can be, meaning each gut bleeds out like a slit pig's, filling the cracks in linoleum, spilling over, becoming smooth. The layers of red dry and build on one another, and for years the gap between ceiling and floor lessens. Backs hunch as the mind saws downward, revealing rings. In the parking lot, "Are you asleep?" says the boy who is not my boyfriend, running his fingers along the band of my underwear. Across the street from this, for years, an ancient tortoise roams the floor of the pet store, closing his army green beak around the red toenails of sandaled women, thinking them strawberries. I feel ashamed for all the moments I've been kind, knowing kindness is all it would take. I get emails sometimes from people who are like, what does that ending mean? I said what I said. Okay, there's, and thinking about the mother line, thinking about mothers, there's an obsession with mothers throughout this book as well. What does it mean to mother, to be mothered? There's sort of a absent mother force haunting the book, and this is one of those. But first, I'm going to get some water. Is this one mine? Yeah. Garden. Feeling my mother's head on my shoulder, I am mourning my childhood without her. Eurydice swims across the black, watery surface of a rabbit's eye, and she is every person I must never make love to if I am to be faithful. In the flooded garden, a single rose clings to the bush like a first tooth, trembling in the air, which is cold, much colder than the God of order promised. Fuck me. I've mistaken the word so long, cold for clean. Okay. And one more on the theme of mothers, but kind of mother adjacent in a way. This is actually a poem for my father. It's called Salmon. My father and I sit at a sushi bar in my new city, sampling 3 different kinds of salmon nigiri. He tells me about a great funeral speech he recently heard a son give for his father. The speech was structured around regrets everyone assumed the father didn't have, interspersed with hilarious stories involving boys crashing the family van and fishing mishaps. The ivory salmon is pale and impossibly soft. The sliver of steelhead, orange enough to pretend it's salmon. How else to say it? I am my father's only child, and he is my mother. We dip our chopsticks into a horseradish paste, dyed green and called wasabi. I know his regrets. I could list them. But instead, at his funeral, I will talk, if I can talk, about nights like this. How good it felt just to be next to him, to be the closest thing he had. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think I'm going to end there and hand it over to...
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I, too, will perch. Okay. Gabby, that was really beautiful. That was amazing. It's so special to read with you, too. A fun fact is that all 3 of our books came out in January. So January just feels like a special month, and I love that we share that. We're January book siblings, even though I am also a dad now. I'm never going to forget about that. That's just extra funny because we're talking about mothers and motherhood. And my book, Theophanies, which just came out last month, is a book that's very much obsessed with motherhood, daughterhood, sisterhood, and the matriarchs in the Abrahamic faiths, specifically my namesake, Sarah. And that is something that I really wrestle with because my namesake is Sarah, but in Islam, we believe that we're descendants of Hajar, who's kind of like this foil to Sarah, or this counterpart. And in the Bible, there's like a rivalry between them. So there's a lot of Sarah, there's a lot of Hajar, a lot of Eve, Mary. It's full of women. So I'll begin with a poem about my namesake Sarah before her name was Sarah. Sarai. A name is not unlike a sexed body. Like mine, it carries, is remembered most for what it fails to yield. A name is a condition meant to last, to outlast, as should a daughter, her mother, tongue. I am, but do not have, a daughter. When I look in the lake, who looks back is a sister self. Oh, little I carry you as you carry who I am waiting to be. Thank you. Self-portrait as Epiphany. I thought myself a child. The river revealed me a basket. Within, a doomed girl grew and groomed. When came the bush, I knew to burn, to sheer errant tongues probing the cage. Mother sang of deliverance. Father prayed for a son. I revised myself a daughter, renounced duty, rolled stones down my throat. In a dream, the angel reveals me a book. I learn myself grime among false gods. Unashamed, I cramp. Between my legs, a clot. From a clot, I'll make men. Hollow myself wholly. Nothing laughs like me. Brittle, brutish, a woman bearing her teeth. I really like persona. I think persona is such a useful way to kind of trace the contours of who another person might be without trying to write over them, I suppose. I think when you write persona poems, you're revealing more about yourself and your own biases than you are trying to say something real about another person. So I find them a good way to figure out what it is that I'm thinking. So this is a persona poem. Annunciation. My pillaged body is not as interesting as my virginal sister's. I know. Your books efface me, dismiss me as naturally lacking. So my hair has long since grayed, cropped short, held back under a matronly veil. I sent my husband to bed another woman. I'm nobler for it. I allowed a slight to get the ball rolling. By moonlight, I grieved the perpetual blood marbling red and black down my thighs. They visited me first, you know, God and two angels. They came with glad tidings, announced I would flower with a boy. But all you remember is what came next. I hung my head and laughed. When God at last conferred my body with fruit, the angels raised their yellow wings. They broke bread. I listened until I heard a great humming. A child, a ripe boy I would mother. The hive coming to me after all I'd done, what else inside to offer at the moment of absolution but a flash of sound? I knew I wasn't favored but damned. My whole long life I'd been groomed to unfurl for the coming of bees. I knew when I passed he would go back to her, and you to your matter day, your lily among thorns. After all this, knowing I'd be written over, a vessel forgettable but for a moment of sonic lapse, tell me, what would you have done? So people always ask me about my name because it says Sarah Ghazal Ali on the book, and people are like, is Ghazal actually your middle name or did you pick it? I am not so arrogant as to pick something like that. It is very much my given middle name. And there's a few ghazals in the book, so I'll read one of them. Ghazal on the day of. Like God, I'll create in my image. Go on, past judgment. Like I'm not already waiting for judgment. Like I don't tease, don't taunt to turn his eye my way. Like I'm not expiring, short-sticked by a judgment foretold in unteachable, spiraling math. Each sky's bloated yoke barrels toward the day of judgment. Seeded, I take seeds to stifle my soil's waiting green. I liken my name to apology. I wield judgment like a snapped beak and shovel night from my abdomen. Are you watching, O corkscrew calamity? O decree, O closer than jugular. Come for this constellating mess. I'm sorry for laughing, O giver, not for taking, so judge. Okay. Roadkill Elegy. In good towns, good houses mourn what dies outside by closing windows. Bullfrog caught in a mower, black-red. Driveway chalk, gray-red. Tire-tracked dough, red-red. Under a sycamore, my throat whirls from pity to nausea. The suburban sky does nothing, sees less. Another small chest deflates at the edge of my vision before gas tank heaves and gut tries to follow. The angel on my left shoulder finds something of interest in the windshield blur of road, then red, body, then blood. He bites my ear and pulls hard my lashes. Look, he insists, where I point, where shells split, where color leaks. Look, he demands, my own palms spangled with crime. He walks across my blades and drags a fleshy bone behind him. In lurid dreams, I resurrect them all, or they refuse to leave, guilt dressed as grace. A frog or my fingers, the blade, always a blade. In good towns, good children collapse snake holes, heal away anthills for sport. Above us, a gray-necked warbler shrieks and shrieks a humdrum dirge for these ordinary deaths. I drive on, bound by time. He sings, knitted to his perch on a telephone wire, eyes fixed to each body I blur past, flaring car after car like poppies on pool water, red. Thank you. This one? The one I just read? It didn't. I never read this one, and I was going to cut it from the book, but it was the one poem that my mentor was like, that's the poem that I define you by, so it stayed. Ode to the mentor. Shout out to Ocean Vong. I'm feeling drawn to animal poems right now because of Gabby. Yeah, like let's think about let's read about things, creatures, alive things. So this is about flies. Parable of flies. I heard them, wings beating a din beyond the thistle, pilgrims beckoned by the promise of carrion. Lured by the lurid, I followed their song off the path, turned my back to the lake. Angels fled the quarry, thirst a blight in their wake. The flies, their mouths roved like dogs the breast of a sundered wren, chest wide as a lens, steady spectator of its own death. This is an economy of asylum. Ruddy flesh calls, come, and brutes abound, haloing their open-handed new home. I'm divining my body a dirtied domestic. When it rains, devotion is the womb I've hollowed to keep desire dry. Thank you. I will read just 2 more poems and then pass it along to lovely, lovely Rachel. Oh, Gabrielle. Oh, umbilical mesh, apogee of angels. Oh, ungendered and sexless courier. Oh, jagged nail fattening on his finger. Oh, arch and archive. Oh, bush ablaze. Oh, throat. Oh, throat. Oh, uterine throat. Oh, mediary of Mary.
of Musa, O pillar of cloud, O brute force, O being unborn yet sent to make me see, O brilliant light, O blotting dark. God tugs at whim your corded tongue, so tilt an ear and shade me. With your heel break open a fount as you did for my sister. All my rooms are greening in weight. Pull back my falling shroud. See how well I bear the burden. A child, come sigh for once in me. And thank you. I have been thinking a lot about martyrdom and martyrs, given what's going on in Gaza, and the spectacle that we make of death, and how mundane and ordinary it becomes, and how we focus more on seeing, destroyed people and just being able to kind of scroll past that. And I wanted to think about this woman, Nabra Hassanan, when I was writing this book, who was a 17-year-old Black Muslim girl in Virginia who was killed in the last 10 days of Ramadan, which is holy month for Muslims, and it's publicly considered an act of road rage, but people are pretty sure it was a hate crime. And I wanted to think about how we can talk about our dead without making the death the focus. When Nabra Hassanan wakes up in Jannah, and Jannah is heaven, she will peer at the back of her hands, now translucent with the bluish quality of a body observed underwater. Nabra Hassanan will see the blood swirling just beneath her skin, and it will be a sweetness to her eyes. Nabra Hassanan will be surrounded by the trees she spent a brief lifetime earning. Glory be to Allah. Do they still accumulate after death, after the new and final beginning? All praise is to Allah. Nabra Hassanan will test these words and all others, look around for a sudden spurting of limbs and leaves, and hum with delight when her gaze is granted, at last, immediate reward. There will be no need for hijab here, no men with appraising eyes, no reason to ever again face rage. Nabra Hassanan will walk and reach for fruit, remembering her mother, all those years knifing berries into ordinary bowls. Nabra Hassanan will see again her mother's two hands pulling apart a pomegranate, teaching her that each orb houses one blessed seed from a tree in Jannah. Nabra Hassanan will hope to find her beyond these trees, among others, resting in the sweet shade of mercy. Nabra Hassanan will be scared that the miracle might end, that the garden might sense her boundless human wants. Nabra Hassanan will float along, buoyed by the thousands still earthbound who bent in congregation at her janazah. God is greater, she will laugh. Nabra Hassanan will never be asked again to qualify, to answer, then what? Nor will she remember how she arrived.
Sada, thank you for reading that poem in particular last. I've been thinking about it a lot and thinking about how much it reminds me of this Mary Shebis poem, Heaven in Miniature, from her book Granted, and like knowing that we can imagine better for our dead, for the dead, is something that inspires me to keep writing in this time of genocide, and knowing that our writing is part of the work we have to do to end genocide. So thank you. And someday when I have the energy to write an essay, I'm going to write an essay about that poem and Heaven in Miniature. I'm gonna read tonight from Dear Memphis, and I'm gonna start with the first poem with it, which is a poem of return, which is, of course, I think about return a lot in terms of Palestinian right of return, which is what we're certainly fighting for in the Palestinian liberation movement and in solidarity, and also as a privilege of the living. Return. Descent jumps and jostles. Nausea drops me back to the floodplain I fled. The taxi driver asks, "Do you have some mixed blood?" He says, "You have an old world face." I let my eyes flare as he drives me past the split where Walnut Grove divides cropland from Greenway. On the farm side, heat gleams on shoulders screened corrections. Workers in the cotton still in chains. Past the test plots, past the longhorn pens, barbed wire blooms into razor. Packing, I stacked books in boxes like green-husked walnuts we left curbside every spring. On every corner, an alabaster cross. My parents made sure we lived among other mezuzahs. Mid-step, I stop where Sweet Pea climbs the chain link. I sketch, invert the corners. Erase, retrace, render the storefronts available, available, available. Follow the beams, someone felled, someone planed, someone nailed in place. Farmers set tomatoes bottom up to hide the spokes of scars around their stems. Sweet heirlooms rest on a folding table, easy like the fat gold fruit I was born to. I know to visit before I point out what I want. Pass my cash, take a bag, and have a blessed day. In her driveway, Minnie hugs my neck, says, "What'd you do with all your hair?" Inside, the news, a robbery, a gun bust. She says, they need to go get a job. I nod and sip my tea, the chill of her AC blowing. We lean almost as close as when we'd visit over the gospel radio. She asks what my parents won't. When are you gonna give your daddy a grandbaby? And just like our Sundays on the phone, I say, I'm all set. When my parents packed up, she got a pension. My stomach growls. Minnie says, I don't need much dinner. As I'm leaving, tell your mama I need a raise. My knife plumbed to a warped board. I set to core a tomato. Imagine the slip clean through, the drip of seedy water into the sink. See the rabbi beam as he tells me how, after a king's assassination, the whole city sat shiva. No riots here. My teeth tingle with an anger he might not approve of. He says people are used to the lifestyle. It's so affordable. Here, my money gets me double the bouquets of basil, double the sinuous summer squash. I buy pounds of peaches to slurp at breakfast, slurp alone in the still afternoon. Who did I choose when I wished myself elsewhere? Yeah, it's a long one to start the book, but you gotta land. in this place. And so here's a little bit more landing space. Descent fragments. When we arrive, the rabbi says, we make a cemetery first, then a butcher, then a synagogue. When one gull sets off a sky siren, I look toward a dozen chasing off an eagle. Is it that easy? Is that why we burned our papers as our ships neared shore? Aren't you descended from a famous rabbi? Says he. The rabbi says ashes to ashes, but we don't cremate. Something about a body for the rapture. No need to tell my husband about the motionless hatchling and bleaching its stain off our balcony. Would you rather be exterminated or assimilated? Between the eaves and gutters, clumps of death come quickly, volunteer their blossoms. Without a prayer book, without 10 for a minion, I whisper the mourner's Kaddish after the administration's first bombs. I watch Kay worry her roving into matted shrouds before needle felting the migrants, mothers, slim-limbed men, children. We have a homeland now, the rabbi says. Inside their fleeced radiance, flotation. Okay, I'm just gonna do it. The boy on the beach. My mother used to mutter, we'd never be safe. We must be safer than they were. I'm not supposed to say how my father bought solid gold Krugerrand coins straight from the Denver Mint and buried them in the backyard, southwest of the swing set. Meet there no, when. My mother kept our passports up to date. That part's not a secret. You can't just sit there. We learned the word bystander to learn there are no bystanders. Not my second brother when I shoved my third. Not in Germany. We don't even know who we lost there. I do not want to tell you about the 4 minutes at sea, what the boy's weeping father told the cameras. No distance from the wreck itself, if you really look. His body is on every screen. You have to see the cavern of his left eye socket glancing the foam. You have to look for a flutter in his lashes. The little shell of his left ear opens upward, but it doesn't hear the rolling surf or the persistent scratch of the Tunisian policeman's pencil, logging his body in a notebook while his cheek presses into sand. So this fall, Sarah Ghazal Ali curated a folio for West Branch entitled Slow Violence. And the call for that folio was so compelling, so generative and generous, and it became a home for a poem that I had been sitting on for quite a long time. And it's a poem about sort of sitting on things. Have you ever inherited something that you did not want? That's what this this is a poem about. So there was this, I think it was like 3 foot by 4 foot oil painting in my grandparents' home in Memphis, and it was a portrait of my great grandparents. And when we were little, my brother, who's 2 years younger than me, was afraid of it, and so they took it down for a while. It was hanging over their record player. But then they put it back up, once all 4 of us were old enough not to be afraid of paintings. And when my grandmother died and we were cleaning out the house that she'd lived in for 50 years, nobody wanted it. But my mom found a place for it to go. The portrait. New Braunfels, Texas. A gold chain lassos her neck and drips into her lap. In oil paint, their eyes look equal in age, image splitting the difference between her 16, his 41. On his upturned palm, the lay of her ringed right hand seems to assure the viewer she was willing. In the parking lot, I pass a rope round and round, tying the frame to the roof rack, while my mother calls, "Tie a what hitch? Won't it fly off on the highway?" I thread the end through a cinched down loop and lean into the tension. Out the window, oil derricks prowl a brown horizon. A timber yard marquee says, "Got land? Let's build." When the roof rack's hooroo ascends to a high he, we pause at a pullout choked with cardboard and diapers to rewind the rope around the frame. The signs say Rhinestone Angel, She-Wolf Drive, Woman Hollering Creek. We turn the painting over to the small town archive. My mother insists on a photo. I refuse to smile. What she wants taken care of, I want gone. Where our ancestors set their mill, I watch an eddy circle round and round, mist of relentless motion calling me into the stream. I won't reach for my mother's arm. I won't paint another picture. I just realized I haven't read a Dear Memphis poem yet.
Read us one.
Cool, let's do that. Oh my god, did I not even have one marked? Horrified. So there's a series of poems addressed to Memphis, Dear Memphis poems throughout the book. I meant to count them earlier, but I think there are 11 of them. And I spent so many years, like 7, or maybe like 6 years, trying to write poems about Memphis, trying to depict the place went and in the summer of 2020, at the Tin House Summer Workshop, which was online for, obvious reasons, but where I met wonderful, amazing people, I realized that I just needed to address Memphis. Dear Memphis, seasick in the car wash, I gripped the wheel while the lights changed, green to blue to pink, and the neutral roll nudged something rubber, something untouchable inside. There's comfort in a constant ache. My restlessness doesn't belong, yet here it lives, where somehow the suds smell like your dust, your most volatile fragments inside me. I've been lucky enough to have counted Gabrielle Bates as a friend, as a dear friend, as like a southern kin in Seattle since I moved there in 2014. And I'm reading this poem because she likes it. 5 miles beyond the wilderness boundary sign, a chipmunk slinks through the lakeside rootscape. Haunches to hide out, to sneak up and chew through the thin plastic that guards the peanuts I lugged from civilization where foraging is leisure. If I drop my vigil to watch a bufflehead splash down, if the flick that chews a crow scares off a chickadee, if I unravel the twist tie and offer the chipmunk a palmful of fat and salt, what else will I have ruined? I think, do you like the chipmunk?
Part. The sounds for me though.
Okay. Yeah. It's a chewy poem. Last week, Sada and I were on a panel together at AWP, like a week and a half ago, I guess. Sada and I were on a panel together at AWP about scriptural entanglements, and Sada spoke just now movingly about persona, and now it makes me want to like venture more into persona, but I'm more of the like midrash style biblical scriptural Tanakh entanglement where I'm writing into the gaps in the stories, like where there are holes. There's this long Jewish lineage of midrash writing stories into what's not said, adding to, fleshing out what we have, and you can do so much with that. So here's a poem that does that. I think I'll read this and then one more. The Tether. Miriam prayed for the basket's weave to hold, for the reeds to hide her body in the banks of the broad and slow. Around her brother, a cloth their mother had wrapped tight. Two teetered, every inhale a tug at the end of a thread. How do you say goodbye to a brother? His body pushed the water aside, the sister into shadow. Thank you so much to Booksmith for being a beautiful space. It feels like an oasis among the overstimulation of hate to just walk in here and land and feel held by these like wooden panel shelves. Yes, yeah. Nocturne. Oh, and this poem, so it's written like this, like the lines are like this in a little raise out from a vacant center. When you're reading the book, you can totally start with any line. Just put it out there. Nocturne. I wake in a pain without place. A functional problem, my doctor said, though I heard her say, you can stand it. No longer a singular injury, not my left lower back, not my knee creaks. We hide our pain from other women. We teach each other how. At my hip, my cat gathers all of her paws, tail on the bridge of her nose, tucked in for the long dark. Pain of motion, pain of stillness, pain of separation. Last month, E's aunt fell and didn't tell anyone. Soon, the harvest will hunch my shoulders. In these wild hips, I'll stand and pound the weeping cabbage into submergence. My mother doesn't trust my brine and boils hers instead. I won't choose to bring a child into this lifetime.